So thank you for attending our webinar on dashboard design for operations. My name is Robert Hilton from Transpara. I'm one of the co-founders here. And one of the jobs that I hold or that my team holds is all of the user experience design. And so that's one of the reasons we've thought about and are now executing on showing people some of the background on what makes a good dashboard and specifically for operations. Now, before I get started, let's do a little bit of housekeeping here. This webinar is being recorded, so you'll get a copy of it afterwards, so no need to take notes. Second is if you have questions, you can put those in the chat at any time, and Emiliano here will be monitoring the chat, and he can either interrupt me if there's a question that's pertaining to something I'm talking about right then, or I will take a few pauses along the way where we can just see if there's any questions I need to answer. So again, please feel free to use the chat there to ask any questions. The third thing is that if you stay till the end of the webinar or till even the demo portion of that and we're into it, we'll also be making available a free ebook that talks a little bit about some of these approaches, but beyond dashboards, even just approaches to excellence in operations and around data and visualization and even how those systems should work. So that's some housekeeping there. And then the way I will handle this webinar is I'll go through quite a bit of PowerPoint here, but quite quickly, and really just focused on some of the fundamentals that we look at for making great dashboards, for what's specific about operations, and really a center mostly on best practices and worst practices. So we see a lot of mistakes that people make and a lot of things that we've seen people do well or things that we recommend or specifically don't recommend. And then at some point I will switch over and we will go make some things together. So I will show you how some of these come about. You'll see that live. And we'll try to leave time for Q&A as well. But again, use the chat at any time as we go through it. So let me dive right in. And I think you can all see my screen. So let me just get started by saying, why are we the right people to even talk about this? What makes Transpara interesting to give a session on dashboard design? Well, probably the most important reason is because we've been doing this for a very long time and we've kind of seen, again, a lot of those best and worst practices. So we have customers all over the world. We're not a new company. We've been doing this for 15 plus years. And again, seen a lot of things. And I'll be showing you examples even that imply or relate to some of these customers, even though some of the data won't be their data. But they're actually real examples that I'll be going through. So that's one of the main reasons why we're the company or a company who can really talk with some authority about this. Another reason is because we have some really happy customers, and when they do things well, then it really becomes an important part of what they do. And like you can see, a lot of these operations dashboards are usually targeted at more or less senior people, but when they start to work, a lot more people use them and start to make them part of their day and becomes very important. So with that in mind, let's talk about what this webinar is really going to cover. First of all, I'm going to cover how simple this is. These are not really crazy difficult concepts to understand. It's just that you may or may not have a background in some of these categories or some of these ways of working. Second is I'm just going to go through all of these, not in a perfect order and not exactly like in a boring slide presentation. I'm going to try to make this a little bit interesting, show you a lot of examples. And then again, like I said, we'll create something at the end and give some time for Q&A and wrap up. So let's dive into it. The first thing I'd like to highlight is that most users in operations in the customers we deal with, in fact, I would say almost all, are not user experience experts. It's not their job to understand all the fundamentals of how to make a great dashboard. They're busy doing other jobs. They're in maintenance, or they are in operations, or they are in safety or quality or some other category. And that's what they're really good at. So it stands to reason that they wouldn't necessarily be an expert at this. However, we are. And however, we have teams and people that are. And so we're going to lean on that and show you some of those key things and really just basic things that you can do to always improve that experience. And one of those big things to know, and one of the key takeaways of this entire presentation, is that a lot of people think because you're in an enterprise or a business application that you're really targeting the business. But at the end of the day, you're still targeting people, and people are still just that. They're people. So when we think about user experience, we don't go look at other business applications very often. We don't look at highly technical or highly specific things. The way we think about this and the way we recommend everybody think about this is like a consumer application. So even if you're dealing with highly technical, advanced algorithms, advanced real-time data, all kinds of interesting things, if you still always think that this is a consumer application, then you're already on the right track. If you're already thinking about, well, what would those categories or those attributes of a consumer application, what would be important about those? And probably the one I lean on the most is this word obvious, and possibly the last one here, no training required. So rather than saying, oh, I've made something that this expert is really going to get a lot of value on, can you make it simple enough that a lot of people can get value on and the expert can get value? Or that people can walk up to this and make sense of it without going to training class? And these are very important concepts, and if you can even start to achieve them, then you're already on the right track as well. So these are categories or attributes that are really important in every decision we make, but also every decision we, all the guidance we give to our customers. So very important piece there. So let's talk about what a dashboard really is, and we'll go all the way back to the very basics here of a dashboard in a car. I mean, what is it really designed to do, right? And who uses it? So in this case, the user is a driver, and it could be any driver. This could be the first time ever drive of someone who has no experience whatsoever, or it could be an experienced race car driver who knows everything about the internal workings of a car. But at the end of the day, what it's really designed to do is help that person make better decisions to get somewhere safely, or to not hurt the car, or to make sure it doesn't run out of gas, or when it needs an oil change, or et cetera. All these different things that you might do to make better decisions while you're driving, right? So it's this supporting tool. And even if you get to a very sophisticated dashboard, like this example, the end result is still the same. Even though this person has gone to years and years of training and is highly technical and a deep expert, you're still there to support all of their decisions as they work. And we think about that all the time as we think about dashboards here. So what's unique about operations? Well, you might think it's quite unique, but in a lot of cases it's not. So some of the things that people associate with real-time operations are the speed of data, this keeping your finger on the pulse, and if I have a problem, it's expensive, and I've got data coming from many places, and I could have, you know, lots of different types of users. They could be deeply technical, they could be field staff or maintenance, they could be executives, they could be plant managers, they could be engineers. You have all kinds of different users that might interact with a system like ours in this case. And in a lot of ways, that's not that unique. So you'd see that in areas like the stock market. You'd see that in even other consumer applications sometimes where you do have these varying things. So there are some things unique about operations, but you can apply a lot of principles from a lot of other places to this, and then just make sure it fits that operational world. Okay. Now, if there were only one thing to take away from my entire presentation today, it will be this thing I call the 99% mistake. And I call it that because it is rare to find an example where someone has done this well if you look at the whole world of examples. And I'll get to what I mean by that. So this is a Google search I did yesterday or the day before, and I searched for operations dashboard. I could have searched for a real-time dashboard. I could have searched for something even more specific, like a mining dashboard or a power generation dashboard or an oil refinery dashboard or anything you want. And you'll get a set of visualizations like this in a Google image search. And these are all beautiful dashboards, most of them. They're fairly interesting. There's a massive problem with all of them, right? And I'll show you a couple of other examples. Here's another one that came up, some more of a real-time operations one for a wind farm. And here's back to that simple example of a car dashboard. And all of these have the exact same mistake. And that is, if you look at them at a glance, you cannot tell, am I having a good day or a bad day? Are things going well? Does something in particular need my attention? Right? You do not get a sense for where are the issues, right? If you just show trends or you just show data, then it's really up to the user to figure out, and it's all their work. And that's a topic we call cognitive load. And the most important thing about cognitive load is, where is it, right? Who's doing it? And if you're forcing the users to look at a dashboard full of data and make up their own mind about whether it's going well, well, first of all, it requires that they have the expertise to do that, and they might, but it also means they can all interpret it differently, right? So who's doing that work? We believe that the software should do more of that work for you so that you can eliminate things like the need for training. You can make decisions faster because you are drawn already to the things that need your attention. So this is, again, probably the most important concept of this whole talk, because if you are able to reduce that cognitive load on your users, then you will get more users, you will get more people collaborating, you will get better, faster decisions, you will achieve some of those things that our customers are all out to do. You will keep that finger on the pulse. So as an example here, if I go to this stock market application that lives on my phone, it's got those characteristics. So even if it's sitting across the room from me and I can't read the numbers, I can still tell, am I having a good day or a bad day? In this case, I'm having a mixed day. But if 90% of my stock portfolio is in Apple stock, then I'm probably having a decent day. But I have this at a glance notion of what I'm doing, and it's current, and it's got something I can drill in and go get a lot more detail, but it's given me that headline view. What do I really need to focus on? What might need my attention? And can I go have a coffee, or do I need to get to work because something crazy is going on? And these high-level concepts in a consumery way are really important even if you're deep in the heart of operations. And I think a lot of people, in fact, most dashboards we ever run across, miss this concept entirely. Now, in order to do this, to even make it possible, you have to have some form of performance that you can rely on. Now, this concept of KPIs is a debated topic. You might say, well, KPIs, isn't that some topic from the 80s or a business topic where executives only look at KPIs? Well, our definition of KPIs is a little more simple. It is really about, can you tell whether something's doing what's expected or unexpected? And if you are able to put limits on things and give them that status and color, it opens up an entire world of possibilities, especially if you do that in a consistent way. And I'll get to that and I'll show you what I mean by that. So as an example, look at this trend. And there's two trends here, but it's actually the same trend, right? If you only look at the top one, it's completely up to the user to say, well, is that a good trend, a bad trend? Is that normal? Is that doing what is expected? Well, you'd have to look at the numbers. You'd have to actually investigate. You'd have to say, or you'd have to be an expert. No, oh, that's a normal pattern, or that's an abnormal pattern. When you apply status, and this is a very simple example with just flat limits on it, could be much more sophisticated. When you apply that, you can see, well, this KPI is quite erratic. And even if I turned off the trend line completely, I can see, wow, this thing's changing state all the time. It oscillates between really high states and really low states. It's rarely near its target. I have a lot more context just by adding this concept of a KPI to a piece of data. And it's quite straightforward to do that. So this changes everything. So now if you look at a dashboard like this from our software, and this isn't even a particularly good example, this is just one where you have some summary information, you've got some KPIs, but ask those same questions again. Am I having a good or a bad day? Well, I'd say probably not a great day because my downtime is really high. That's always an expensive number. My availability is quite low. I've got problems in many areas, maybe mixed, but I can also say what needs my attention. Right here on this map, I can tell, well, I've got this one site that's already a problem. If I look at a summary of all my information over here, I can see, well, I've probably got some problems in maintenance. I've got some problems with my generators. I've got this system group has some issues. And I've got some issues with wind speed and other things. But I don't have to really look around, and I don't even have to read the numbers to know that, hey, that's something I should go look at. Right? So, and that's the next step, is I can drill into any of these things because it's interactive. So answering this simple, very high level questions, if you can't do that with your dashboard, you've already kind of gone down the wrong path. If it is really just a sea of data, then you've missed an opportunity there. Now, that's sort of highlights of it, but let's talk about how you even approach this thing. And it's a topic we call progressive disclosure, which is used in a lot of areas, this term in user interface design or user experience design. But I'm going to show it to you in one particular way. And an example of that is a newspaper. So newspapers have a long history of doing this somewhat well. So in this Times of India newspaper example that I took off the web, this is a somewhat medium to slow day in the news. You don't have a huge headline like a giant earthquake or a war broke out or something dramatic. You have some headline, some things that across the top about the world. Then you get a little bit more into just what's happening in India, and you get down into the lower areas and you get things that are less important or may support the things above, right? You're seeing some things about COVID at the very top, and then you're seeing some things about COVID a little lower that are more specific to a smaller subset, meaning in this case, the country. And then this Simpsons headline here, which kind of highlights it in a funny way, which is that obviously you want to go from top to bottom on what's important. And as you go down, these should either be supporting things or just the less important things. The way to think about this is like I've already described. If I was going to take just a 2-second glance at my dashboard, right along the top, it should tell me, is everything okay? If it is, maybe I don't even read down below. That's really all I needed to know. If there is something interesting, then start telling me more as you go down the page. Is it anything critical? If there is, show it to me a little bit. Where is it? Could be geographically where, or inside my information model or asset model where. When has it happened? Is it getting better or worse? That's more of your trend-like comments. And as you go down, you get that supporting information. Now, here's another way of kind of thinking about that, and one of the templates I use in my head when I'm designing a dashboard often is, can you get to 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 or those massive KPIs for whatever the dashboard is used for? And remember, in our systems and in most systems, you're going to have many dashboards. You're going to have them maybe a summary dashboard. You're going to have asset dashboards or departmental dashboards or use case dashboards or any of these things. So whichever one it is, what are the headlines of that? What are the things, the small handful of things that tell you, is the rest of the system in this area going well or not? And if they are, then you've already done a good job there. And then you want to support that. Could be, well, let me show you a summary like that dashboard I showed you a minute ago. It shows all the things in it summarized. And then maybe compare some things to me. Are they worse or better? How do they compare these different categories to each other? And then maybe some trends, maybe a map. Where is it physically, if that matters to you? And so this is not a perfect case here where you can just follow this and put these exact visualizations. Everybody is dependent on their own and what problem they're trying to solve. But the pattern is still the same. Importance and summarization at the top, going down to all the things that support that or add additional details. And remember, the user can always click into these things. So you don't have to say everything on the dashboard. You need to say enough to tell the user whether they do need to go further. And again, that goes from top to bottom, but also the ability to drill into any one of these things. So here's an example on the right from one of our customers in the satellite space. And what this customer is doing is monitoring satellite broadband. And they have some very top level things for their executives, like overall availability and capacity and port tickets. And in this case, their day is going fairly well. They've got a little bit of a capacity issue, but in general, they don't have any major support things. They may compare, like, of their support problems or their incidents, which priority are they? Their lowest priority ones are the highest volume. So that's probably a normal scenario for them. Their most severe ones, they have a fairly low number of, if that's low for them, and they will know that and they'll be able to rank it. Or in terms of their customers, their retailers, which are called VNOs here, they can see that, well, most of the traffic is coming from one or two of those. And so if there's an issue there, they got a quick glance to that and say, oh, I might want to look at what's happening with VNO 47. And then there's some trends. This trend is kind of looks like a fairly normal situation, and then some summarization. So that's one example of that top to bottom kind of world. And then they have beams coming off the satellite. In this case, it's filtered to only show them ones that have problems. There's like 98 beams coming off this satellite. And if you showed them all, it would be a mess of data. In this case, you want to be exception-based. You only show them things that might need their attention. If everything's going well on the rest of the beams, no need to show that. Okay, so just another example there. Now, here's another major mistake that we see a lot of people make. And that is, maybe they're using BI tools or they're using a reporting engine and they call it a dashboard. Well, in operations, if you are using a dashboard that is somewhat static or even considered static in that way, we would say you're already also making a mistake there, because that's just giving you part of the story and missing a huge amount of the opportunity there. So in our world of operations, we think of everything as alive. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's extremely slow moving data or extremely fast moving data or a mixture of all those things. What we care about is if something goes wrong or starts to go wrong or trends in an interesting way or crosses a threshold, even if it changes once a year, do you want to know about it right when it does if it's important? And that matters, because if you're looking at a weekly report and something happens on Monday that you could have fixed, but you don't see it until the report shows up, you've made a huge mistake in operations, because everything in operations is about keeping your finger on the pulse there. So this is another very important thing when you're thinking about a dashboard for operations. The example I like to give is, imagine a Formula One driver who's looking at a report, right? Things change every millisecond on the track, and he cannot look at anything slow moving at all in order to make decisions there. Or imagine a stock trader who can't drill into stuff or cannot change the time range easily or cannot go back. So if you're looking at static reports, you already are at a disadvantage there, right? So if you're keeping your finger on the pulse, a report is mostly telling you also what happened. It's only backward looking in most cases, where what we really want in operations is what happened also, but what is happening and what is about to happen. So if you want to make great decisions, you need to know that. And what's about to happen could be sophisticated, meaning I'm doing real-time predictions and forecasting and other things. But it can also be more simple, like watching a leading indicator. Hey, every time this vibration number starts to increase, that means that I'm headed towards a problem. And if I fix it now, or I check on it now, it won't lead to downtime and I won't wait to do that. So there's various levels of sophistication here, but pretty much everyone can watch leading indicators and make sense of what's happening there. So another key thing that we see people make a mistake on, or people who've done it well really get around, is by avoiding that concept of reports. Now, reports are still useful, but they should not be confused with an operations dashboard in that sense. The other thing about dashboards is they are not to be considered just a standalone object by themselves without any system supporting them or without any other things around them. And we do see this sometimes, especially in the business intelligence world, where somebody really just makes an isolated dashboard. It's completely custom. It doesn't relate to other dashboards or other parts of the system. And if something goes interesting on it, how do you go and look around? How do you go look further? How do you go into that? If it's not made that way, it's not really like that. So we believe all dashboards should be part of a system. And I'll highlight this a lot in the demo when I make a dashboard. where I make it, instead of starting with the dashboard, I start with the system and say, what are the interesting things in the system that should be on my dashboard? And this is a very different approach than you'll see in some other applications, but a very powerful one. And it also means I can do things much quicker than I could in other pieces and with much less expertise. The other thing about dashboards is they should be personalized. And that when we describe dashboards as a feature of our software, which it really is just a feature, we think about it as the personalization side of the system. So when I talked about it must be part of a system, well, the personalized side is saying, okay, take from that system the things that matter for these particular reasons and lay them out a certain way for that particular use. And by person, we don't necessarily mean an individual. In our cases, it could be for a person, but it also could be for a particular piece of equipment or a department or a global dashboard, or for a role like an executive or maintenance or safety or quality or field staff. Could be for any particular reason. So let me give you an example of some of those. Here's another one of our customers who is monitoring real-time bridges. In this case, they have 5,000 bridges with sensors on them, looking at this entire portfolio to see if they're having problems with them, or if they're degrading faster, or if they need repair or maintenance. So the executive looks at the entire fleet of 5,000, and they have a very simple dashboard that really just says, what percentage of my portfolio is at risk? What major alerts do I have? Am I in compliance, et cetera? Where the next person is the asset manager. They don't look at all 5,000. They look at some subset that they are responsible for. They have some of the same KPIs, but they've got some different ones, like how many of them have overdue inspections. They may have the similar things as well. Then you get all the way down here to an individual asset. This is an individual bridge where I want to see the details. I want to see its fatigue. I want to see its condition score. Or maybe I want the schematics right embedded in there. I want links right to the design documents. I want key events that apply exactly to this bridge, and maybe in this case, a live video showing me of that bridge. So again, a real system should have many dashboards, and as many as you want to accomplish your task. You don't need to boil this down to just 2 or 3 or something if there's use. And then this concept of a hierarchy of them is also very important there. Now, another thing which goes completely the opposite of what we're talking about here. We love dashboards. We do them all the time. It's a very important feature of our software. But we also believe that people shouldn't sit around and stare at dashboards all day. If we've really done our job right, then you shouldn't stare at our software all day. Our software should tell you when it needs your attention and do that. And we think that software should always be that smart. And the key to that is alerts. And this is where your KPIs really add that thing. So when something needs attention on it, and when it happens, and you want to skip all that and go directly to that problem. You don't necessarily need to stare at a dashboard and wait for things to show up. Right? Again, KPIs make that possible. Giving things status, giving them the concept of expected or unexpected behavior is really the critical factor that says, oh, now I can also establish alerts. Hey, anytime this goes into a triple high state and stays there for more than 10 minutes, alert me. Or any other condition I want. Then I skip all of this and the system will be smarter and tell me what to do. So again, flies in the face of just making beautiful dashboards. They're great, but if you really take it further, dashboard is not the first place someone should look. Now, one of the last pieces here is getting information at the right time to the right person. And one thing you can count on is that they're not always sitting at their desk. So another mistake we see people make is not making this stuff mobile. They really think about it in a almost control room like way, like, oh, it's got to be there and it's always got to be perfect on this nice big screen where everybody is. But in the world of operations, people using our software are often the people in trucks or on a ladder fixing something, or in a dusty, dirty environment, or an underground mine, or some other place where things aren't perfect. And so you cannot underestimate the need for mobility. Now, in our case, everything you build in our software is automatically mobile, and you don't need to go build a new dashboard just for mobile devices. It will automatically work, and when I make one later, you'll see that. But we can't stress this enough. And you should also think about the visualizations you pick for these devices, right? Because a lot of our visualizations are really meant for mobile. We think of ourselves as mobile first and then expand it up to the big screen as opposed to the opposite. And that's a very important concept. And I'll show you a couple of those visualizations that we recommend and a couple that we don't, even though we support them. Two of those are the pie chart and a big gauge. They're beautiful visualizations, but they're often hard to read. They take up a lot of space, and they're very hard to compare to each other. And so we have other visualizations that we feel are even better than that. And I'll show you some examples when we make a dashboard. And again, going along with mobile and going along with not having complete control over your environment is that you have to pay attention to what is going on with your users or where they are. And this is also called accessibility in some cases, parts of it. So you have to think about people that are in these environments, or maybe they're colorblind, or maybe they're wearing gloves, or maybe they're an older user that's not used to technology, or sometimes afraid of technology and afraid to click on things. So how do you make things accessible and make them easy? And again, goes back to this lack of training. Or take the colorblind example as well. You can't just use color. In our case, right along with color, everywhere we can, we use status icons with shapes, so that even if you are colorblind and someone has chosen colors in the system that don't work for you, you still have that concept. Touch, when you're on a device, making sure those touch spots are large enough. Now, this is stuff we worry about that you don't have to worry about, but it matters when you think about designing dashboards or designing what you're doing. You know, you have people in various things. So again, filling a screen full of really dense data might be useful if you're in a perfect environment, but if somebody's out in the field, it might be a terrible idea because it's very hard to read. So pay attention to some of these things as you go through your dashboard design. Now, the last few things here is I talked a little bit about hierarchy of dashboards. If you have a hierarchy of information, if you already have, well, I've got a global rollout of Transpara, and I've got inside of there regions and then sites, and then within a site I've got areas, and within that I've got equipment, or I've got it by department, or I've got it by both, or any of that. Well, you may want to consider dashboards at each of those levels, where you have a global dashboard or a regional dashboard, or if you've done it by role or category or department, like safety, quality, maintenance, etc. It's often good to have dashboards, even as a starting point, at each one of those main things, or by use case. All right, so think about that in the same way you think about the hierarchy of information in your system. I already talked a little bit about choosing visualizations, like pie charts and gauges are often a bad idea. It depends on where you use them, and even in some of my cases, you'll see I use them myself, but a lot of times we try not to. A funny one that we've found is if you're, for example, doing a pilot of our software and you're about to present it to your executives, even if it was a single site and was inside of a building and there was nothing useful on a map, we always recommend that, because for whatever reason, executives love a good map. And there's a few other visualizations, which I'll show you, that are also what I would call eye candy. They might not end up in your final dashboards, but if you're presenting them or trying to gather support or other things like that, they're very useful and they're very easy to make. So that's another one. Now, there are tons of these little things. I could go on for hours about that, but I don't want to waste all the time here in the webinar. So if you need other things, we're always here and always willing and actually encouraged to answer these questions. We love talking about these things, so don't be shy and ask us. Now, with that, I'm going to switch out of PowerPoint here. Maybe I'll ask Emiliano, are there any questions that I need to answer?
No, Robert, we don't have any questions.
Okay, Great. I do see some chats. Thanks for everybody for filling out things in the chats. But feel free to ask any questions here. I'm going to jump out of PowerPoint and let's get into some real software. Now, this is something I haven't practiced. I'm going to make this up completely on my own here. And I have a few different sites open. I've got some of those I've given examples of in the thing that you'll see, but I'm going to go to this mining site here. And I'm going to make a brand new dashboard from scratch and show you how I might go about picking things for it, how I might put it together, or how I might make decisions. So the first thing I'm going to do is go up to my dashboards here. I'm on this profile. I'll stay on the Michael profile, even though I'm not Michael, but I'll just do it there. I could make a new one as well. And I'm going to click New Dashboard here. And let's give this a new name. Let's call it Webinar Dashboard Design, and I'm going to save that. And now let's go over here to my dashboard. Let's refresh it here, and you'll see I'm on a blank dashboard. Okay, so there's nothing here. Now, this is part of what I mentioned about being in a system. So in a BI tool, for example, or in a lot of other things, what you'd have to do here is start making things from scratch. Well, the way our software works, you define things, you define a hierarchy, and you define metrics, and you define other pieces, but you don't really have to make all of your visualizations. You just have to define things. In this case, I have a system. I've got a hierarchy of information. I've got KPIs at various levels. I've got other chart types or other things that I've defined. So it's all a working system now. I'm just going to make a particular dashboard. And so let's make one for, let's say, an executive. This might be a little bit random because I don't know very much about this demo system. I don't know much about a mine myself personally, but it'll still show you some of these core patterns. So let's look around a little bit in what we have. We've got some high-level KPIs in here. I can go into this executive summary part and see if I've got some interesting things. I've got total production here. I could look at this a few different ways and see if it's interesting, or go back. Let's go back up to my executive summary. Let's go into gold here. Let's look at safety. Let's say safety is a very important topic. So here I've got some safety KPIs. Let's pick one of those. And I will say my total reportable injury frequency. That's an important one I may want on my dashboard. So I'm just going to add that to my dashboard to start with here. Now I'll go back up here to my hierarchy again. Actually, let's go back into gold here, and let's look at production. Got production, I've got ore grade, I've got recovery. Let's actually just click on this whole bar and see what's in here. Here's a whole set of KPIs. These are probably pretty important to an executive, your overall production and by which type of commodity. And let me just go up to the right here and say, let's add that to my dashboard. Okay. I'm not looking at my dashboard yet. I'm just kind of poking around and seeing if there's any other KPIs that might be interesting to me. So let's see, here's a chart down here called ore grade. So this is showing me production by which thing. That's a good comparison one. Let's add that to my dashboard. And let's keep going up here, see if there's any financial KPIs that might be interesting to me. Oh, let's see, maybe this G&A cost total. Let's add that one to my dashboard. And that's now on there. Let's go all the way back up to the top. Let's go even to the home group here and see what else we have. Let's look inside the, let's go into open pit here, and let's say this is a neat, interesting summary of all the KPIs in all of these areas. Let's add this summary view to it. Now let me take a quick pause here and say I've added a bunch of stuff to my dashboard. Let's actually go take a look at it, right? So here's all the stuff that's on it. I've only added a couple of KPIs. Let's move those up to the top as a starting point. And let's make some of these things a little bit different sized here, and we'll get around to figuring out what we like. Let me save that. Now I've got a kind of starting of a fairly boring dashboard just yet. So let's go over here and get some more interesting things. I'm going to go over here and get a map. So let's map the whole thing. Here's a map of all these groups of KPIs here. As I mentioned, we love a good map on a dashboard. So that one's now in there, and we'll go over and put it in place. Let's make that a little taller. We'll put that right there. Okay, so let's go find some more interesting KPIs that are of use here. Let's go back to our list view. And sorry, I'm moving a little bit fast. If you want to learn a little bit more about how our software works, we're happy to give you a demo and walk you through some of these things, or you can go to our free training online and see kind of what I'm doing or how the software works and even how these things get into the system, which is also very quick and very easy. Okay, so let's go into the, no, let's go into, what is it? Let's go into the crusher here. Let's look at maybe things over time. So this is just a different visualization that shows that erratic behavior. This is a 1 week chart. Let's say we want to look at maybe just the last 3 days of this. So there's my 3-day view, and now I'm going to add this to my dashboard as well. Let's go over here. We'll put that down here for right now. Okay, some interesting information coming in there. And let's go back to, let's get a couple of more interesting KPIs here. At a high level summary, I probably want this. Now let's go back to my hierarchy and go into, let's go to sites. Here are all my sites. This is probably an important roll-up for an executive to see what's happening in each site. So let's add that to the dashboard. And then one more fun thing I'll just add is I went to YouTube and I found a not live, but a video, you could be a live video, of an excavator here in operation. So depending on what your role was, this might also be supporting information to whether things are going well, is to say, well, let's actually see it. So let me put some of these here in place. Here's all my sites. Let's put this embedded video down here lower, and let's save this. So now I've got this dashboard kind of filling in here. I've got this live video going, which I could choose to loop here. And if that was live, that would be a view of what's happening out in the field as I'm going along here. So I've got a few things. Maybe I'm looking at all of my KPIs here by site, and I'm looking at all of my KPIs here by what asset they belong to. I'm looking at some high-level things, but let's go get a few more high-level metrics to add in here, just some single KPIs. And by the way, please keep asking questions, or ask some questions if you have any about what I'm doing here or about how this is in. All right, let's go into material handling. Let's go up again. Let's get a couple of KPIs in here. Let's go find our grade, and let's go get our percent of target, and we'll add those two to the dashboard. And now, oh, I already had, oh, no, there we go. And I'm going to make these a little larger now. Safety is an important one. Grade and my cost KPI here. Okay, so that's a high-level way that I just made a quick dashboard that shows off maybe some of the things that I might care about. Now, these all got in here, again, through, this could be manual, it could be through automation. We have customers who have upwards of 500,000 or 600,000 KPIs, and they're all in a highly organized hierarchy where you could still build a high-level executive dashboard without ever drilling down, and then build a really low-level dashboard or all the levels in between there. So in this case, I went through an entire mining scenario, made up some things myself as not a mining expert, and gave it a decent looking dashboard here that would let me know if all these things across the top were all green. Maybe I'd pick a different set of KPIs depending on my role. Then I might not need to look, or I might need to just look here at this top part. There's another user experience concept that you might be familiar with called above the fold, which goes back to the newspaper kind of metaphor, where if you have to scroll down to see other things, then you may have, those things below it should only be supporting information. If you really need to get your point across on a dashboard, it should be done on what would fit on that screen, right? And again, when you're on mobile, that's a little bit different because people are used to scrolling a lot faster. So let's take a look at this dashboard and see what it would look like on a phone. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down here. Let's just make it a little smaller. And now I've got this fully functional dashboard here with everything included in it, right? All the way down to even the video. And so on my phone, I still have this nice summary of information. I can still see where I need to go. And most importantly, if I see something that's interesting to me, I can simply click on it and go into it and get more detail and actually find out what I need to do. So interactivity, a very important part there. So let me take another little pause. Does anybody have any questions or any feedback for that? Again, please use the chat if you are interested in knowing. And also feedback, very important. So if you think this has been useful, we would love to hear about it. Now, there's one other visualization that I put on here that I added to this system just for the purposes of making an interesting dashboard or sort of having some fun. And that is a new feature in our software called an image overlay chart. And actually that's I believe, called, it's in the Crusher. So I'm going to use search and go to the Crusher group. And then you'll see this image overlay. So what I did was find an image of a crusher, put a handful of random KPIs on it, probably not very relative. And let's add that to our dashboard. Again, now you can take any image that you want, apply and position KPIs right over it, and put it in any particular place that you feel is useful. And now I've got my crusher image there, and that would probably be better at a little taller size. And there you go with my live KPIs on it, and I can go right into those and get a trend of that information. So that is kind of a highlight of some of the best practices of dashboard design, of how our software comes together to promote some of those things, and hopefully a little bit of a useful information as you go about making any dashboard, whether it's in our software or anything else. So that's all I have for the webinar today. Again, let me know if there are any questions. And even if you'd like to ask them live, we can go ahead and turn on the ability for people to speak.
Hi, Robert. We have one question from Javier. Does the dashboard support video and cameras?
Yes, absolutely. So this could be live video. We have customers that already use it with live video feeds there. I just use YouTube as an example. I do have a bridge example with a live video, but still coming from YouTube, but it could be a direct CCTV camera.
Okay. That's the only question, but people, if you have any questions, please, now is the moment.
Yeah. And if you don't have any questions, I'd like to thank you for your time today. And again, you'll get a recording of the session in a few hours. It'll come automatically in your email, but if you don't hear from us, please reach out. And then as far as things that you might want, if you will see that there's a ebook there. Hopefully you can see it in your experience, where it is available to you for downloading right out of the webinar tool that you're in. That is our Data in Motion ebook. We also have a lot of other content, so feel free to reach out. The other sort of call to action is if you want to learn a little bit more about how this comes together, if you want to get a demo of the software, or you'd like to try it in a proof of concept with your own data or data sources, please reach out to us. You can see my contact information there. You can also just reach out to us directly on our website or at info@transpara.com.